On the 1st of March 2010, a group of journalists from the International Communications Forum, including Martin Lewis, Magnus Linklater, Michael Smith, Robin Williamson and Pam Jenner, visited the Lincoln School of Journalism to meet with staff and students to discuss the world of ethical dilemmas and newspapers going online. Professor Richard Keeble did not take long to get down to business, asking Scottish edition of the Times editor, Magnus Linklater, the probing question of, newspapers are moving online. How is this an ethical threat?
It's an ethical threat because, God, you're getting me straight to the, right into the heart of
university.
It. Bloody hell. Anyway, what the ethical threat is very simply stated. Newspapers have the resources, and have hitherto had the resources, to train up journalists, to weld them into a reporting team, to set certain standards, for better or for worse, but nevertheless to control the output of those journalists and to ensure that certain standards are met. Without that resource, that training, that ethos, if you like, of a newspaper, one which sets standards and expects its journalists to maintain them, we are all simply vulnerable to the vagaries of that internet world out there, where of course regulation is at its minimum. You can and do say anything, print anything. There is very little control. So my argument would be that newspapers, however fallible they are, nevertheless are currently the guardian of the ethics of the business. And take them away, take away that resource, take away that foundation and that structure, and I simply can't see what takes its place.
Okay.
Former BBC anchorman Martin Lewis was quick to answer the question, recognising how important it is to embrace online technology, referring closely to the digital newspaper device known as the Kindle.
As you asked the question that Magnus has talked about, I have a slightly different take on it. I actually think that there is a possibility that the newspaper world will actually get it right. It might take some time in doing it, but I think that because you've got to make the transition from an internet that everyone is used to taking as free, where information is free, to charging from it. I was quite encouraged by the fact that 2 months ago on holiday, I suddenly saw this woman reading a Kindle on the beach, you know, the new electronic thing, and started talking to her, and she was actually reading that day's Daily Mail, which she had downloaded. And I said, well, what does it cost you? She said, it cost me £15. She said, I travel around the world a lot, and I have a permanent subscription. Wherever I am in the world, it actually downloads my daily paper for me, which I can read on the Kindle. And she's paying £15 a month, which is actually the same as you would pay if you were buying the Daily Mail on the street. There are incidentally no advertisements on the Kindle. So she is paying just. So there's some good profit to be made there for a simple download by newspaper.
Columnist of many years for the Cambridge Evening News, Pam Jenner, was next to tackle the question and immediately explained what is good and what is bad about the newspaper industry and journalism as a whole in today's world.
I could just echo what Magnus has said as far as the condition of newspapers is today and the good and bad. But could I bring it down to a more journalistic level of what I think is good and what is bad about journalism today in newspapers? And one of the things that I think is really bad and has been for many years, but it seems to be getting worse, is this insidious political bias on national newspapers.
Freelance and obituary writer Michael Smith finally gave his view on newspapers moving onto the net and focused on the democratisation of the media and also ethical dilemmas he had to face as a journalist.
One of the great developments of online technology is the democratization of the media. And we're seeing this with what has now become known as citizen journalism. And I think one of the classic examples of this was the photograph of the woman who was shot in the protests in Iran, the young opposition woman, and within hours of her death, that picture was around the world. So we're getting this participation of citizens in communication. The downside of it, of course, is how much can you trust what is written. So I think this places a great onus on professional journalists like yourselves when you go into the industry to be sure that your integrity is absolute as professional journalists. And I'll just tell you one little story to illustrate this. I went to an international business conference in Switzerland some years ago on business ethics. The FT wanted a story on how does business ethics apply in practice. So in quoting, there was a German businessman there, and in writing the story, I quoted him, and I inserted the word ethical into his sentence on the grounds that this is what he meant to say in his broken English, though he didn't actually use the word. And I thought, well, anyway, I'll be able to check it with him before sending it off to him. Couldn't get through to him, so I sent the story off to the FT, and then just had a little bit of qualms about this because I wasn't quoting him absolutely accurately. So my conscience got to work. And the International Communications Forum, the founder of it, Bill Porter, always used to say that the ICF is a conscience-to-conscience activity. So I thought about this for a little while, and I phoned up the editor of that particular page on the FT, and I said, look, I did insert this word ethical into his sentence. I'm not being ethical myself. Please, can you remove it? And to his credit, he took this very seriously. And he said, right, okay, we'll take the word out of the sentence. Now, it was a very small point, but the point was that I had to live with my ethics. I had to live with my conscience, my integrity. And I think once you start twisting your own integrity, then you can start going down the slippery slope. And in the extreme, you get entirely fictitious stories told as fact. And we've seen that in the New York Times happened. So I think the onus is back on you as young professionals, as the schools of journalism, to emphasize this business of absolute integrity, if you like.
International Communication Forum's Executive Director, Robin Williamson, ended the day by giving the general public a brief history into the ICF, explaining the story of founder Bill Porter and how he wanted to make a difference in journalism.
We're an organisation which was set up some 20 years ago by an old friend of mine, Bill Porter, who was a journalist, then a publisher, then a rich publisher, and he retired to France and contemplated living a nice life, playing golf and playing bridge and going to nice restaurants. But he read an article in the Financial Times about the media being the most powerful industry in the world and behaviour. And he cast his mind back on his own behaviour as a media man and as a publisher and as a businessman, and decided he had certainly not behaved particularly well or ethically in his career. And he grumbled, and his wife looked at him and said, well, if you feel like that, do something about it. He actually wrote a book called Do Something About It. But he set up this organisation, the ICF, International Communications Forum, really to bring media people together, journalists together, media people generally, to examine their own conscience, to talk to each other about issues that face in the same way that our colleagues here have talked about briefly this afternoon. And by simply exchanging views to come to understand that it's an individual's personal conscience, how they work in the media, that will bring a greater ethical understanding. Anyway, it's a privilege that we've been able to come with my colleagues here too today. We want to engage you in the thoughts we've had. I hope that it's been useful. We certainly have, I hope my colleagues have enjoyed coming here, enjoyed the hospitality here. I hope they'll come again, maybe bring a different group. But thank you all very much for attending to us.
Thank you, Robin. On behalf of the university, do something about it. Well, we've done something about it. We've got established this very close connection now with ICF. We have a terrific debate running through today with students, members of the public, colleagues. The issues are so complex, really, aren't they? There's no really right or wrong. It's important that so many different voices are heard. We've heard some terrifically well-informed discussion today, led by our colleagues. Is that a hand?
Yeah, I just want a PS.
Okay.
A PS.
Okay. Go for
Yes.
it.
A book.
A book.
Richard is editing a book called Media Values. The authors of the book are old colleagues and friends of Bill Porter, who've known him for years, including 3 of the people on the panel here, writing essays about their understanding of media ethics. It's going to be a great book, with at least 20 contributions. Richard is editing it. It'll be coming out this year, I hope. So
Absolutely.
I draw your attention to this. It's going to be published through Richard by Troubadour Press.
Troubadour. That's a very nice plug to end on, but let's really thank the panel.
Richard, could I add just one PS, which is something that may have a sort of, I don't know whether you've heard about this in the journalism school here, but in a journalism school many, many years ago, decades ago, someone put a notice up on the notice board which said there is only one emotion stronger than love or hate, and it is the need to change another person's copy. and that had only been up there for 15 minutes before someone crossed out the word change and wrote alter.
Excellent. On that note.